Why did the photographer go to jail? For flashing everybody. I met you years ago, and you've been doing art and photography for quite a while, and that's where I had met you, was at the Met downtown, which was sort of an artisan marketplace for people to go and check out and buy from creators in the community. What sort of stuff, other than photography, do you create and sell?
Basically, photography is my primary business, but outside of that, I like to paint. I like to create narratives and make stories and tell stories and explore different elements of the human psyche. But that's kind of more of my jam outside of work for paying rent. And painting is not something I get to do very much of anymore, unfortunately. I have a day job too, so
Right.
I work a lot. a lot, and I'm looking at going back to school, so
Keeping busy.
yeah, no rest for the wicked. Last year, a huge focus was my art grant, and I did it. And this year, I was looking into doing more shows, but,
The world ended.
Said no. The world said no. The world said no, we're going to brew our dumpster fire, and we'll care about art later.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay.
Did you find through COVID and the quarantine any uptake in creativity?
Not really. I had a period of time where I found that I was able to paint a little bit more, and I was able to work it in my daily schedule. But as for actually creating things outside of just practicing, because I'm also very rusty, and I like to think of practicing art as an exercise to train your hand and your eye coordination, and I'm bad at it now. So it's kind of frustrating not being able to purchase said supplies that I may need, so working with what I have, a limited palette, was annoying. But as for creativity, I kind of was forced not to do much. I had to actually start focusing on self-portraiture because I wasn't allowed to photograph anyone else, really. So my own personal side project that I use for my mental health exploration and artistic flexing, I guess, is a little project that I've ran for about the last 6 years called My Messy Lens.
An exhibit that you did before all this crap happened, I believe that was Idiom. From what I understand about Idiom, it was a different number of photographs with a different theme for each photograph or sets of photographs, and it was run through the London Arts Council. How was setting up that show, and how did it turn out?
I had a tiny army of human beings who helped me assemble that project. Yeah, I had some pretty absurd requests from people, and they helped me obtain some of them, make some of my crazy ideas work, and it was wonderful. I chose, I believe it was 10 cultures that reside in London to kind of show the diversifications of our city, because I kind of wanted to see the project, choose an idiom of a language, and then just choose whoever people I knew in London. That was kind of one of the prerequisites. Basically, the premise of that was that I would choose an idiom, 10 different cultures that reside in our city, and choose ideally someone who was not visually representative of the culture, so other people were forced to see other people within those contexts, because it was that humanity is more universal and more alike than anything else, and that even with language barriers and other cultural barriers, we still kind of have the same human experience overall. And it was just more of a play of exploration on metaphor and just kind of having fun with it. So I had someone arrange me to get some cows for one of them. And that was a fun shoot, and convinced my poor friend to wake up at the ass crack of dawn and play his guitar to cows.
I believe I saw those photos. It's actually quite funny, because there's one cow that's looking at him from behind like, what is this guy doing?
They were into it, totally. They were just weird. They were just, they can't hear anything, right? He's just, why is this crazy monkey standing here with things? Let's go check him out.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of strange requests, having my friend bowling with beer, which she had a lot of fun with, actually. And just having a lot of strange little favors to ask of a bunch of people I knew. So that's basically how that came to be. And convinced the City of London and the Arts Council that this was a great art project to throw your money behind.
Do you find that the London Arts Council is choosy in who they support?
I can't necessarily have any opinion on that because I don't really leave the house enough to have any judgment of that. I know that they try to have eclectic shows, they try to have things that are more community-based and a little bit more widespread. Because, I've had like 4 or 5 rejections before I even got considered, and I decided to go for an exploration on metaphor as opposed to my other subject matter I've wanted to explore beforehand. It's one of those things where you just gotta keep relentlessly trying and see what sticks. Think of it from their perspective. Would I want more support? Yeah, that would be awesome. Will I get it? Probably not.
How was the turnout for Idiom?
It was actually way better turnout than I was expecting. I was really happy. I was overwhelmed. Lots of good food, music. It was everything I wanted it to be. Good turnout. And from what I heard anyways, I had some pretty decent feedback. It was good times. It was nice to see about a year's worth of work coming together, because that was over 14 photo shoots and many weeks of planning and trying to coordinate schedules to get that executed.
Photography, I find, can tell a story or change your perspective just as much as a painting could.
Oh yeah, I used to have many arguments with my professors in school, because some of them were just like, no, you're not an artist, you're a photographer. And I'm like, why can't they be the same thing?
Exactly.
Why the arbitrary lines? That's just really weird.
Yeah, because I think it's totally an art form, because you're not just taking a photo, you're adjusting your settings for more light, less light, farther away, closer, different effects with your lenses and stuff.
So yeah, it's like you're dealing with about any other art form. It's basic communication, just trying to get your message across. It's either going to work or it's not. That's not necessarily the medium's fault. It's what you're doing with it. So I've always been a little sensitive of that, because I've had a few people bring it up. I'm like, it's not like it's any easier, it's just faster than oil painting.
Mm-hmm. Also, too, that it's been around forever, as compared to photography, which has only been around since maybe the mid-1800s, early 1800s. People had to sit still for, like, hours.
Yeah, it's terrible. I felt terrible for the models who had to sit for some of that shit. Because it's way harder than you would think, holding something for, 2-3 hours. The people drawing you, they get really pissy.
It sounds like it was a really cool exhibit. A lot of cultures represented: Native Canadian, Polish, West African, Chinese, Portuguese, Spanish, French, all over the world. And the photographs that I've seen are very impressive. It's good that local creators are able to show their work off. And I hope that once all this crap gets solved, people can enjoy their town's art once again.
It's really kind of disappointing, because London has a vibrant art community, and not many people are super aware of it, and we have just so much talent. And it's a shame that so much of it's hidden away, again, with, across all mediums. The city has, so much fun going on. Any given day.
You had mentioned it's not easy posing or holding something up for a long period of time. One other aspect of your photography is implied nude photographs or boudoir photographs. What do you, as the photographer, offer the person being shot as far as reassurance and making them feel comfortable? Because I would imagine that if they're not seasoned or used to it, it could be a very vulnerable spot to be in.
Well, the thing is that you only see a small, tiny portion of my work online, through Instagram or anything. I think 80% of my is super censored, rated PG-13 content. So a lot of that work that I create is with other models or other photographers and artists. They're not necessarily what I would call typical civilians. Courtney that I've worked with, Katie West, we've been doing this for about 10 years. And it ranges from artistic implied nudity to not so artistic, very blatant nudity, depending on the subject matter and what we felt exploring at the time. I have a large body of work dedicated to that. That's, I think, what you're referring to, and I usually just post little snippets of it on my Instagram. Unless it's usually my creative endeavors and stuff like that, or what I do in my free time. Usually my horror stuff, which is something I do for my birthday, because I'm an October baby. All
When
those
are
horror
you?
Photos. October 20th.
I'm the 26th.
Oh, okay. Awesome. You're just, yeah, same week.
I'm the same way. Not so much anymore because I've grown up and have kids of my own and I'm just always busy. But I used to be insanely jacked for Halloween as soon as October 1st hit.
I'm not quite as intense as I used to. Now I just celebrate more with, work and fall walks and pumpkins.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's my favorite time of year, and I love the horror genre. And just if I get a chance to do, I'm not doing one this year, which I'm kind of sad about. But this will break my 10-year streak that I had going.
Do you
But
find that autumn is, I don't want to say better, but there's more beauty in autumn, I guess?
for myself, the light from September on is just absolutely phenomenal for me. I love how the light is, like, I understand the days are shortening, but the angle of the sun is just absolutely gorgeous. Early October or even late October evenings, where the shadows are just really stretched out and there's just a little bit more atmosphere in the air. It just makes me happy. And generally something kind of I always look forward to for photos, and I myself can't handle heat very well. So I prefer working outside in the autumn, especially if I'm running around trying to direct something. Or one year I did a shoot where we just kind of had to stop halfway through because the model was sweating through the makeup. It wasn't working anymore, so we're like, let's just let you go in the river now. We're done. So yeah, it kind of makes things a little easier. I just like the vibe and the light better for myself personally. If I'm doing summertime, I usually prefer dawn, which most people aren't really into.
Waking up super early.
Yeah, it's like, let's wake up at the ass crack of dawn and drive out to Port Brewer.
On average, how long would you say like a shoot for you lasts as far as hours?
Oh, not very long. I have the attention span of a ferret on meth. It depends on what it is. If it's a concept that I have in my head, it's hilarious because the preparation is far longer than the shoot. Significantly. Hair and makeup takes a lot of time, and if it's a very specific concept that's like monster base and it's very limited movement or whatnot, then it's like a half an hour, depending. Especially if I can't move locations or change my lighting up too much. So it kind of depends. Usually, like for my portrait work for clients, it's anywhere from, if like I'm meeting someone I don't know, it's a completely different thing. If you'll notice in my creative work, I work with the same people all the time. I have severe social anxiety, so it just takes all that bullshit out of the way. I've already worked with these people. They know what I'm about. It's easy.
Totally.
I don't have to warm them up. We know how to work together. I do that for a very strategic purpose for myself, and that's just because of how I am as a human being. When it comes to client work, it's a lot different for me. I approach things a lot differently. It's about making it an experience for them and making them comfortable as opposed to me collaborating with someone else, right?
Right.
So it's me providing experience over, let's get this fucking done. When I'm in get her done mode, my shoots tend to happen a lot quicker because I also have a very specific vision in mind. When I'm working with someone new, it's kind of like, let's get to know you, let's kind of joke around, let's see what you're comfortable with. If you smile a little too tensely, if you need to relax your jaw, it takes a while to warm people up. And, I don't know, lure them into a false sense of security so I can strike. That's generally the differences between how, like, if I'm working professionally or if I'm working for myself, right? With my creative shoots, that's why I work with people, the same people, over again and over the years. It's just simply because I know them.
Although we haven't known each other that well over the years, I have followed your work just through the grapevine and on the socials. And you do seem to work with and are comfortable with working with the same people like Faye Daniels, Mary Kate, Kat Krawczyk, and a whole bunch of local people around town who model and have sort of the same aesthetic and thematic interests that you do, which I would assume makes you more comfortable. And I totally get the whole idea of anxiety because I've been battling with it myself for the last year and a half, as well as severe depression. And having that comfort near you sort of helps you forget your troubles just for a little bit.
I call it dipping underneath the waves, and just kind of takes away that utter pressure for myself anyways when I'm anxious and I can't focus on my work as well. So I lose a lot of my creativity because I'm up my own ass. So I don't know how else to really explain it. So it's just, yeah, when I'm doing creative work, or if I have a concept, I need my comfort peeps, my people who understand me. They're up for whatever. Like my friend Courtney, she knows that sometimes I'm a little bit more reserved when it comes to experimenting and wanting to do photos, like with myself in them, because she's helped me a lot with getting over my own weirdness and my own insecurities of doing my self-portraiture, because it's something I've always wanted to explore. I had a lot of weird hang-ups about it. She's kind of been a mentor over the years, and she kind of entertained my weird little, hey, do you mind just doing this few shots with me? I jump in the frame, which is really weird when you're nude. In that kind of setting, it's not really workplace appropriate. So it's not something common, but me and her have 7 years of friendship and drinking martinis and bitching about men. So we kind of have a solid relationship where you can kind of do that, whereas I can't do that with other people, or I myself don't feel comfortable with that, because I take a remarkable long time to get to know people. I've also been told I come off as kind of a bore when I'm with new people, because I have a bit of a wall, and I try not to do that when you're interacting, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of like a weird self-preservation thing.
Yeah, it's understandable, because it's like assessing this situation. You're sizing up the person, not in a negative way. You're looking out for yourself. And there's nothing wrong with setting up boundaries that make you feel comfortable. Just reassure the other people that, like, I don't mean any offense. It's just, this is something that I need to do that will be better for the both of us in the long run.
We all worked within one collective. Kat, Mary, Courtney, I met outside of that, but once upon a time, we used to work together on a collective thing called Sin Labs. So they were my artistic family, is what I would call them, my creative incubator. So I could play with them and kind of experiment and just go nuts with my crazy ideas in a safe space. You know what I mean? It can grow. Or I can make mistakes, or we can laugh at it and move on and make new mistakes. See what works, see what doesn't. And I kind of took that aspect to other creative relationships that I had with people, because I work better, right? I just produce better work that way. So I just kept doing it. Some people are like, don't you get bored? And I'm like, no, they're fun. I'm like, the idea of introductions every time I'm doing a shoot makes me want to stab myself in the face. Like, I don't mind working with new people. I actually had the pleasure of working with a male model, which is something I haven't done in years, and he was absolutely wonderful, and then COVID happened. But yeah, it was such a fantastic experience, because it was a new project I was working on, and new human being. It was a great pleasure, and I kind of do miss that experience, but I've kind of tried to creatively move to other outlets.
It's good that you mentioned Sin Labs, or Sinister Laboratories, for those who don't know. I've been to Shockstock a couple of times. I had a booth of my own at Shockstock. One of the things that I always would look forward to, especially like online and on social media, was seeing what did Sinister Laboratories come up with this year, which looks awesome. And your displays at Shockstock and events around the city adds that element of spooky, creepy, horror fun that some people don't like, but is really loved and appreciated by certain people, like, a lot. What Lee does with his props and his sets is amazing, and your photography and the models and all those people just wrap it up in a package that I look forward to seeing, like, every year. And it's a shame, because of COVID, that wasn't really allowed to happen this year.
I was totally bummed about that, but I don't think it was going to happen anyways this year for other reasons, COVID or not. For the same, not Shockstock. Shockstock lives on forever, but like the Sin Labs being able to display this year. But I'm hoping that we are able to do it next year for sure. Because I miss the weirdo Christmas.
Right.
It kind of just made the long, gross part of winter just more palatable. Like, there was just your weirdo little fest at the end of that. Fuck your roll up the rim, weirdo Christmas.
Back around to artistic nude and implied nude work. One thing that I've always had on my mind that I've wanted to ask a photographer or a model or creator is this negative view of nudity, and particularly in the internet world, the changes that Tumblr made to their website, which pissed a lot of people off. Because Tumblr was a huge platform for photographers, models, and when they made those stupid-ass changes, there was a huge exodus of people away from Tumblr. I wanted to know what sort of stuff that you run into as a photographer and creator with this continual bullshit about nudity.
Yeah, I am still mad about Tumblr. Still raging mad, because that was my other little safe space creative community. It was outside of Sinister Laboratories. I had my little Tumblr peeps, which is Courtney and Katie West and Jax Fishburne and just wonderful creative souls being able to create that kind of body of work. It just kind of wiped it out. So we've been just struggling ever since, just not having the same connection, not the same community anymore, which kind of sucks, especially in this particular industry. It's rife with predators and other fun, crappy individuals. And if you have a tight-knit community, it's typically a little safer for everyone. That's one of the disappointing factors. I'm not saying like the dissolving of Tumblr kind of ruined that, but it kind of did to a certain degree, because it hasn't been as well connected ever since. Outside of that, the weird projection people throw onto artwork and nudity in the human body is just bizarre to me. I don't get it. Never have. As an artist or a creator, once I make something, put it out in the world, I have a firm understanding that I'm going to lose control of its original meaning. So it's kind of one of those things that you've accepted. Like, you still have your artist statement and your whatever that you have with it, but once it's out in the world, people do with what they may. Whether or not they're going to sexualize it, completely different thing. When it's nudity, they're going to do it, especially when it's photography, because it's more associated with pornography. So because of that, I got a lot of dick pics for a while, because I also use myself in some of my work, so they make certain assumptions about myself, and it's like, okay, I know my work's lumped in with sex work. That's fine. I'm with good people. It's the weird objectification and just morals that people just impose on artwork, and I just don't get it. Because, like myself, I don't see my work as overtly sexual. Not mine particularly. And like Jax Fishburne, an asexual artist, so I'm amused when people project sexuality. Because I'm like, you don't get it at all. You're funny. But I don't know, it kind of just depends on what the pieces are and what the meaning behind it is. I don't understand why people get all upset about areolas, especially if men are able to show them. That's the thing. I was like, what is it specifically? Is it the areola? Is it the nubbing? Is it the fat? What is it? I don't mind censoring my work, because then it gives me an excuse to drive people to my website where I'm not forced to censor my work, or through my Patreon. So it's like, you want to see uncensored content? Fine, you can pay for it. Outside of that, I'm forced to work in the confines of our shitty society.
Right.
Stars on nipples for everyone.
You had mentioned Patreon. One of the thoughts that I had was, I would assume that the rise of Patreon or OnlyFans and sites like them, where women, men, not all of them, are making quite good money selling nudes of themselves or erotic, sexual, pornographic content. And I would just see that as sort of sullying the waters for creators like you and models like those that you work with, who are trying to present it on a more subtle artistic side.
I don't see it as selling it. It's what it is. People like what they like. Whether they want to throw dollars behind my stuff because they find it more aesthetically pleasing for them is irrelevant, really, for me, because I don't make it for that purpose. But if that's what gets your money flowing, sure. What's the line, right? Because, like, I know some people who make really heart-achingly beautiful fucking smut. And it's not stuff I would ever make, but it's absolutely gorgeous. And I'm not going to say it's selling in the waters because it's more sexually explicit. It's just as valid, it's just as beautiful, it just has a different audience.
One person that comes to mind is Camille Hannibal Cam Damage, especially, is it Shibari?
Yes, the Shibari.
The Shibari work where they're hanging from ropes, and it's not only physically fascinating how they're able to do that as far as hanging for that period of time, but a lot of this stuff, it's done in a way that there's a beauty to it.
Yeah, I love that work just because of the juxtaposition of it. Also, it's well shot, and some of the content's just absolutely mesmerizing. Like, you can't not look away. It all depends on the artist. Well, you can do it good or you can do it bad. And there's a lot of people who unfortunately don't do it as good as others when it comes to that type of content. With the OnlyFans thing, you have like actors and whatnot poaching that avenue now. So it's just like with Patreon, I've never been able to, make it work successfully. I'm able to cover my domain cost, but that's usually about it. Pay a couple bills while I can still make some art. And the fact that I have anyone who gives a shit about it just still fucking baffles me. So I make my little Patreon, and it keeps me accountable, it keeps me creating, and I'm sometimes really bad at it for updating and keeping it consistent, but for what you pay, it's not terrible, because I keep my little cost on it down. I don't market my work like other people's. I've always felt kind of weird that kind of work lives, because I just like creating it, and it gives me, especially my self-portrait work that I do is more for myself than anyone else. That's kind of a weird thing where if people are going to see it, then it's a smaller audience. I feel a little bit more comfortable with that, and they already have a following my work, so I feel a little bit better showcasing that type of work to that small audience. I'm definitely not like Katie or Jax or Courtney in regards to their Patreon, where it's actually a valid line of income, whereas mine is not. I just kind of make because it's almost compulsive.
You feel the need to do it?
Oh, kind of, yeah. And I get really sad when I don't do it after a while. So it's like I've been doing this since my early 20s, and I'm 37 now, so.
Along the same lines with music and comedy, it does get to that point where it's something that you just feel compelled to do because that's the person that you are, and when you don't do it for a while, and it was just like what you were saying, if it makes you feel good, you're doing something that you feel that you're really good at and were meant to do. And hey, if you make a couple of bucks on the side that can help offset the costs in your life, then that's all gravy on top.
Yeah. I don't ever expect to make a living off my nude stuff. I'm lucky if I can sell a few calendars. But I definitely have some pretty awesome exhibits in my back pocket for whenever I get the funding for them.
What's that process like?
Oh, it's grant writing for provincial, and I did city, so I haven't done federal yet. The federal one I know is the most difficult. If you get the local one I received, I was told that the provincial ones are a little easier to receive. Usually you should apply for both of them at the same time to cover your costs more effectively, because your grants do not cover the full cost of your project. So, yeah, it's my husband helped me. He's a bureaucrat.
Oh, nice. That's helpful to have.
Yes, and I am not, so I'm like, help with the application process, please, because I want to skull fuck myself.
Yeah, it can be quite lengthy. With music, there's a number of factor grants that you can apply for, and they want every single piece of information that you can provide about where is this money going, what are you using it for, do you have receipts, and it is quite a lengthy process, so I do understand what you're saying. And to have someone who sort of knows that world and is into it is an asset.
I wouldn't say he's well versed in the world, but he's just a little bureaucrat. So yeah, he's more tolerable than I am of it, because I have also recently learned that I have ADHD, which actually explains a lot. So I'm like, yeah, forms aren't good for me. I get lost.
I was diagnosed with ADD as a child, and I'm pretty sure I have it as an adult. It's one of the medications that I take. It's for that. But I totally get what you're saying. Distracted easily, inside my own head, often, a lot of the time. It can be very problematic. And another reason why I wanted to talk to you, I had a good friend on a previous podcast who suffers from bipolar. He was kind enough to come on and have that vulnerability and chat with me about it. I knew I wanted to talk to you to get the female perspective of mental health. One of the questions I have is, I would assume that everybody experiences everything different, but I kind of feel like it'd be a lot more difficult for females.
I don't know necessarily. I think mental illness is just a shit hand in general. But yeah, it kind of depends. Like I watched my mom go through it because she was diagnosed with bipolar. For myself, I struggled with PTSD, and a pretty epic anxiety disorder coupled with a rotating depressive episode fun thing. So I don't have the full technical names on the laundry list of ailments that my brain suffers from, but I had a very, very turbulent childhood, which is kind of why I am the way I am to a certain degree. But I watched my mother have to deal with the stigma of being bipolar, not being taken seriously, and being reduced down to being that crazy bitch. And her being treated very, very poorly throughout my entire life. I don't know too much of the men's, what they have to deal with outside of, you're only limited to having one or two emotions. You're not allowed to talk about anything, which seems that sucks. But like for myself navigating it, I've been navigating mental health since I was a child because my mom was also illiterate and she needed someone to help advocate for her. So that task was handed to me at the ripe old age of 8. So I started learning about the psych wards at 8 and exactly how to keep mom out of them, but that didn't really happen. My mom wasn't medicated and stabilized until I was like a teenager. When I was a kid, she was in and out of psych wards until I was about 15. And then I had some semblance of stability, and that's when my own mental disorders started to manifest. I was the angry little goth kid, and then I was sent to the social worker who I didn't like, and then I fucked with her mind a little bit, played some head games, and then I was sent to psychotherapy at the age of 16, and I was kind of forced into it or else I was going to be expelled. Because I was a bit of a shithead, I kind of fell into therapy that I desperately, desperately needed when I was a teenager.
Experiencing what your mother went through and having to advocate for her at such a young age is a really heavy thing. And what I find is when you're immersed in a bunch of different things at once from all sides and you're just busy with everything and you're focusing and being concerned about others and being there for them and advocating for them, you don't have a whole lot of time to reflect on yourself or, practice self-care and what is best for you to maintain your health. And then when everything sort of levels off and there is that time to reflect, it can totally shut you down because it's like a dam breaking.
Yeah, it's like, basically the floor falls out. And I didn't learn very many tools to cope with my emotions as a child, so I wasn't really allowed to have any. So I had a lot of difficulties coping and struggling with my own mental illness. Just had a remarkable amount of experience with it. I think I moved to Toronto when I was 18 years old and I had my first panic attack, like full-blown panic attack, where I thought I was dying. And I ended up hiding in the Henry Moore sculpture for 2-3 hours until I was able to calm down enough to call somebody. And, form words. That was like the first time I dealt with that. But that was also like a triggered event from one of my professors telling me I was wasting his oxygen and that I needed to sit down. So I was like, critiques were harsh. Outside of that, like, I've been in psychotherapy for so long. That's been the thing I've attributed to saving my own life personally, is my doctors over the last few years. I've done a lot of talk therapy and a lot of, I call it digging up skeletons, and basically learning how to identify set of emotions and sitting with them and processing them. So in a lot of ways, I feel like I am just super behind everyone else in, like, mental development, processing basic things. I just simply didn't have that opportunity when I was young. Again, my life wasn't terrible as a child. My mom just simply didn't have the capacity to do a lot of this herself. And so it's just something I've had to go off on as an adult and learn. I found a lot of that has helped. Being self-aware, also having the shit kicked out of me in life a few times has kept me humble. It's a battle, but like for myself recently, I've started exploring medication, which is I didn't realize I was existing without serotonin. So I was like, oh, is this what it's like? It's been a long time since I felt like that. It felt like I had a light switch just kind of come on one day. I wasn't even aware that I was that badly off. So I was just like, oh, interesting. Gonna keep trying these out then. Fun little serotonin pills. I've now since, leveled off. But it's not the same, like, oh my god, like my brain is working. But it's given me a normal, like I can wake up and feeling neutral. My anxiety levels are way more easy to manage now. Plus also with therapy and the tools that I've learned. One second, I'm just out of there. Sorry, one of my bunnies is being a dick. Get back.
Oh yeah, I noticed, like through Instagram, you have 2 rabbits, right?
Yes, I do. So
I've always wondered what it's like having a rabbit as a pet.
They're dicks. They're adorable. But if you think cats are sassy, they're sassier than cats. The one that had her throat ripped open, I was medicating her after her surgery, and she didn't want to be medicated, so she was throwing toilet paper rolls at me.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and they get into everything. So, and when they're mad at you, they thump at you and just run off. That's what she just did to me.
Yeah, I remember seeing that one of them had gotten injured, and is that because the other one like beat the shit out of it?
Yes. So a friend's small child snuck upstairs and let my buns out. I have them separated, and they live completely separately because they, in fact, do not get along. They hate each other. And to the point where they will murder each other if they're stuck in each other's presence for terribly long. So,
wow.
Small child, as you know, little ones. She's like 4 years old, so she just didn't realize that's going to be the result of bunnies. So
I never would have thought that they're so territorial.
My little one's an angry one, and she wasn't very nice to Pickle, and she bit part of Pickle's nose off, and I think that was revenge. That's why Pickle tried to kill her. So anyways, way more dramatic than I ever expected. I like them, but they're definitely an interesting pet. Not for children. I wouldn't recommend them for littles unless they're like 12 and over, and they're totally willing to spend the time with them. Because, yeah, they require a lot more space and a lot more time than you would think. Especially when you have 2 of them and they have to have separate playtimes.
Yeah.
So, especially after the last vet visit.
You are an East Coaster.
I am from out east.
What, where did you live and when did you arrive in Ontario?
Well, I'm an Army brat. So I was born in Dartmouth, or actually technically Halifax, because Dartmouth doesn't have a hospital. But, yeah, born in Halifax, lived in Dartmouth on base. And then when my dad was transferred to Trenton, that's when we were transferred to Trenton. And I think I was about 4. So, and then, yeah, my mom and I moved to the London area, I think, when I was around 8.
That's interesting because the person I interviewed a couple weeks ago, Anne Moniz, she's an army kid as well, moving around a lot. I wonder if it's more common than people might think. Do you have any brothers or sisters?
So my family is weird, not traditional at all. I have a sister who's 15 years older than me. I have 2 brothers who are significantly younger than me that I've never met. My dad had set up another franchise somewhere else.
Yeah, that must be difficult, especially as an army kid moving around a lot because you're continually going to like a new place. It almost seems like you don't have that opportunity to have those relationships and connections with people because you might not be there for that long. And I wonder if it causes people to be more comfortable by themselves.
I was part of the army life probably until about 8. I did move around a lot after because my mom and I left my father because he was not a nice man. So afterwards, I did move a lot in London, but that was because of poverty, not so much army. Again, I have a weird childhood when it comes to that, like the army brat thing. That's where I explains why I was in Nova Scotia. My sister had to deal with that more than me. She has a lot of the same things where she also is super introverted, likes to stay by herself, has issues making connections. So probably not a wrong assumption.
It was a real pleasure speaking with you, Echo.
Thank you very much for having me.
Nice meeting you again, formally. And if people want to check out Echo's great work, her Instagram, you can check out at Echo's, ECHOS gallery, where you can also find a link to her Linktree website that has more places that you can go, and echoesgallery.com as well. You can check me out on Instagram and TikTok at Scott_loves_puns. Puns is with a Z. You can also find me on YouTube, Scott Loves Puns _ASMR. And you can also purchase my audiobook and new comedy EP for only $2 and $1 at swo.bandcamp.com. Thanks for listening and have a good night.